as we have further updates from, of course, the Indo-Pacific. Now, Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles has warned that China's massive military expansion poses growing risks to regional security, saying it demands a response from Australia and other nations. Speaking at the Indo-Pacific Naval Conference in Sydney, Marles has described Beijing's actions as the biggest military build-up in the world today, carried out with strategic reassurance. He said this has made the Australian Defence Force's mission to safeguard open sea lanes, including vital trade routes through the South China Sea, increasingly risky. Marles has outlined Canberra's plans to strengthen its maritime capabilities with a more capable, lethal, long-range navy, including acquiring new frigates from Japan, developing submarines, drones with US firm Anduril, and expanding naval shipyards alongside the Indian Ocean coast. Delegations from the United States, Japan, the Philippines, Singapore, and several Pacific Island nations are attending the Sydney conference, which also features discussions tied to the AUKUS Pact, which under which Australia will develop a nuclear-powered submarine fleet with the United States and the United Kingdom. Now, outside the venue, around 100 protesters, including pro-Palestinian groups, have demonstrated against the event, where several Israeli defence companies are exhibiting. 7 people were arrested following clashes with police. Okay, now joining us to discuss this is Andrew K.P. Leung. He's a China strategist and he joins us live from Hong Kong. Andrew, Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles has warned that China causes a massive threat in the waters of the Indo-Pacific, and particularly, of course, the South China Sea. Of course, there has been multiple incidents of aggression, mainly towards Philippines ships, mainly in the disputed Scarborough Shoal. Of course, not violent actions, but very much a flexing of military might, water cannons, etc. What are your thoughts on the statements from the Australian Defence Minister? Him saying that Beijing is the largest military build-up, maritime build-up in the world.
Well, I think there are several perspectives to understand. First of all, in terms of total expenditure as a percentage of GDP, China's military expenditure is by no means the world's largest, or not even more than the middle-range countries. It's less than 2%. I mean, you look at the numbers, compare with the United States 3.4%, which translates into the largest military expenditure in the world, more than the next 10 countries combined. So that's one perspective. The second perspective, of course, the China's increase in military expenditure and military modernization is as a result of guarding its own interests in the Asia-Pacific, and particularly in response to a very robust or increasingly more robust China containment policy dictated by the United States. Think about the first island chain with military assets center in Okinawa, the second island chain center in Guam. And of course, the United States is rallying its allies. You just mentioned Australia in the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal south of the South China Sea. And then further up north, you have the Philippines more recently. And then, of course, combined with the so-called Quad with India and Japan and Australia. And now fostering a closer military partnership between Japan and South Korea. So that's another dynamic. And of course, the South China Sea is a very important a sea lane of communication for China, because through which passes through China's economic lifeblood. China depends on international trade to a much larger extent than the United States, which of course economy is is driven largely by internal consumption. And then, of course, the city communication involved the importation of essential foodstuffs, minerals, and other parts and components. So I think that's from that perspective, China's military buildup is understandable. Now, the third and perhaps equally important dimension is, of course, a deterrence against any pro-independence movement over Taiwan. Not that Beijing wants to invade Taiwan as a popular kind of myth by 2027, because China sees that as a trap, but to increase the deterrence against any pro-independence movement in Taiwan.
Okay, Andrew KP Leung, thank you very much. Do stay with us. We have further updates coming out of Beijing. And China has sentenced 5 people to death for their involvement in a violent criminal gang operating fraud schemes in Myanmar's Koh Kang region along the border. The 5 convicts were found responsible for the deaths of 6 Chinese nationals, the suicide of 1 individual, and injuries to several others. Many Chinese and foreign nationals who were trafficked were forced to work in scam compounds and have stated that such compounds have flourished in Myanmar's borderlands. Beijing has stepped up cooperation with Myanmar in recent months to crack down on said compounds, resulting in the repatriation of thousands of people to China. The Koh Kang region holds significant importance for China, as in 2021, strikes by Myanmar's junta triggered intense fighting with a powerful ethnic rebel group in Shan state. The region is also home to a multi-billion-dollar rail link being developed under Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, Andrew KP Leung joins us once again. Andrew, tell us about the significance of these scamming centres. Of course, it is a joint operation through China and some other Southeast Asian nations as well as Myanmar. How significant are they in these desolate regions across the Indo-Pacific? Of course, 5 people now have been sentenced to death for operating said schemes, so they must be pretty serious. What more can you tell us?
Well, you just put your finger on it. It is this kind of criminal cancer cell sits right at the heart of China's Belt and Road Initiative through Asia and neighboring countries. And that's point number 1. Point number 2. The scam is targeting a lot of Chinese nationals, not only inside China, but also in Hong Kong and other regions, and is caught in even abducting innocent tourists or visitors to Thailand. And so it's not just Myanmar, it's Cambodia and Thailand in this border area. And that's presided over by a international criminal gang, and then involving establishment of large camps guarded by armed guards, and forcing the innocent people kept in captivity to do all sorts of telephone scams in the region and even around the world. Hence, this sounds as a stern warning, and in fact that Beijing has successfully smashed this international gang, and of course exemplified by the sentencing of these main criminals.
What more can you tell us about the death penalty, capital punishment in Beijing? Of course, operating scam centres is an offence which usually wouldn't warrant such a penalty. What in the United States, for example, what is the way around? What more can you tell us about capital punishment in China, Andrew?
Well, I think that each country's yardstick on capital punishment is different. Not to mention countries in the Middle East, for example, or in the Arab countries. But as China is concerned, when a crime reaches national proportions, and then there will be proportionate punishment meted out as a warning to the others. I think in generally in the West, the sentencing policy is individual specific, proportionate to the crime committed by the individual. But in China, the culture, the sentencing also, there is an added element depending on the severity and evil influence or criminal or influence to the society and threatening the national security. So I think that those added elements, of course, are taken into account in the sentencing.
Yes, Andrew K.P. Leung, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Always a pleasure to talk to you on these issues. We now move on over to North America, but to a related development next. And in Canada, immigration, refugees and citizenship in Canada has implemented tougher scrutiny and reduced the number of study permits issued for the second consecutive year, seeking to curb temporary migration and address fraud. The policy changes include a newly introduced cap on study permits set at 437,000 for the year of 2025, representing a 10% reduction from 2024, and the requirement for a provincial attestation letter or territorial attestation letter to confirm compliance with provincial study caps. The tightening of international student rules has drastically affected Indian applicants, with the rejection rate for Indian student visa applications soaring to 74% in August of 2025, up from 32% in August of 2023. This sharp increase has alarmed students, education agents and policymakers, highlighting the profound impact of Canada's stricter immigration policies on one of its largest international student populations. Andrew Latham joins us once again to discuss this. Andrew, of course, you yourself is originally from Canada, and what is the relationship between India and Canada now? Of course, the last year has been rocky, to say the least, when it comes to the relation between the two countries. And so what is happening with these the student visas? A more than doubling in rejection for Indian students here.
Well, a good question. There are a number of lines of inquiry one could pursue, one of which is what is the relationship between India and Canada? And at a people-to-people level, it's very good. There's a very well-established diaspora in Canada, centered on big cities like Vancouver and Toronto, where I grew up, well-integrated, successful, etc. But on a people-to-people level, there's also been an importation of diaspora politics as well. So there's a Khalistani movement, which is well-established in Canada, which the Indian government does not approve of, obviously, and has taken some fairly drastic measures to undermine. And that's generated friction between the two governments for obvious reasons. Prime Minister Carney, who came to office in the last year or so, has, I think, attempted to reset those relations and to normalize, as it were, the relationship between Ottawa and New Delhi. And I think that's proceeding. But Prime Minister Carney also has a domestic set of issues to deal with, one of which is migration. There have been, on student visas, but also on temporary work visas and also on immigration visas, there have been more than 1 million people that have arrived in Canada in the last couple of years. And there's probably been, and I'm exaggerating for rhetorical effect, 10 houses built in that time because of the NIMBY phenomenon, not in my backyard. And so there's a real tension between the need for workers and for schools, the need for international students who pay more than domestic students, and this problem of transportation, of housing, etc. There's also a fraud dimension to this, which we can talk about. But those are the big 30,000-foot issues that play here. And
yes, let's go into those fraud allegations there as well. The Canadian government cite the tackling of fraud, address fraud in particular, and, as you say, to curb temporary migration. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, it's become something of an industry in Canada that I'll call them entrepreneurs will set up bogus or phony schools that will then students can then apply to, and then when they get to Canada, there's no school to go to, and they just enter the workforce at the very bottom rung of the labor ladder, as it were. Somebody makes a lot of money off of these criminals, criminal entrepreneurs, let's call them, making a lot of money at the expense of these Indian students, some of whom are legitimate students, some of whom are just looking for a backdoor to get into the country to improve their economic prospects, etc. So it is a thing. It is not limited to the Indian student body, the international Indian student body. This is a broader phenomenon than that. But I think disproportionately, Indian students constitute the majority of the applicants to Canadian schools, and so they're likely to be disproportionately hit as a result of this this clampdown on the part of the national government in Ottawa, but also the provincial and territorial governments as well.
Andrew Latham, thank you very much. Always an absolute pleasure to get your insight. We now move on over to Southeast Asia for a developing story today, where in Vietnam, at least 40 people have been killed and 6 still remain missing after a week of record-breaking floods and torrential rain swept through the country's central provinces. Authorities say the worst-hit areas include Hue, Da Nang, Lam Dong and Quang Tri, where streets have turned into rivers and thousands of homes are underwater. The Disaster Management Agency reports that up to 1.7 meters of rain fell in just 24 hours, breaking national rainfall records. Nearly 80,000 houses are now flooded and 10,000 hectares of crops destroyed. Meanwhile, the region is bracing for more danger as Typhoon Kalmegi moves from the Philippines, where it has already killed at least 5 people, and that the storm is expected to make landfall in Vietnam by Friday, bringing winds of up to 166 kilometers per hour. We will, of course, keep you updated on that situation.